Well, I hope you enjoyed that intro. It was a painstaking process to put together, let me tell you that. But it was a joint effort between myself, my girlfriend, and a YouTuber called Hadouken. So I just want to say thank you to those guys because I thought that was a pretty good intro for one of my videos. Something a little bit different. And I will say one thing though, my girlfriend's turning into a little Battlefield pro. That double headshot there you saw in Striker Karkin, that was her, not me. So going from that American-themed intro, we go straight into the main topic of this video. And that of course is the Battlefield 4 All-American DLC idea that I've been having. I've been cooking this thing up for nearly a month now, and I did mention it back a little while ago in my DLC video for Battlefield 4 specifically. I did mention a couple of the maps that I'd come up with, and you guys seemed extremely interested. So I've made a video separately for it, and we're just going to have a little chat about it. Just a couple of things before we get going that might interest you. Some concept art for the Fishing in Baku campaign mission has been released. That's rolling around at the bottom of the screen right now. So if you're interested, there's a link in the description. They're all 1080p, so you can whack them on your desktop. And also, a good way to get into the Battlefield 4 beta is of course to have Battlefield 3 Premium. And digikeys.co.uk right now have that on sale. A link to the website's in the description, and it's actually endorsed by myself, Doom49 and Pixel Enemy. So that website is legit, guys. But anyway, I'll stop rambling now and get on to the main point, which of course is my Battlefield 4 idea, an all-American DLC. This was a rumoured DLC pack for Battlefield 3, so I thought I'd take the idea over to Battlefield 4, give it a little bit of new life, and maybe just put the idea out there, because let's face it, you never know who's listening. The 4 maps that I've come up with are New York Manhattan, the Mojave Desert, an Alaskan Lake, and the San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge. So first of all, we start off in Manhattan in New York. The main centre of this map is the River Hudson. There's a bridge that goes over the river. That thing is fully destructible. It also houses a conquest flag when you're obviously playing that game mode. And once the bridge is destroyed, it reappears on the wreckage in the middle of the river. The reason I chose Manhattan is of course those beautiful skyscrapers. I could see some great action going in on the ground with a few tanks, a few vehicles, maybe even a few scout helicopters going in and out of them. Then of course on top we do have the sniper's nest, which are accessible by the elevators that we saw in the Siege of Shanghai multiplayer map in the alpha. I think that was a really cool system, so I thought we could translate that across to the New York map too. And finally we have the Statue of Liberty. This is more of a sort of morphed version of New York rather than being an actual full-scale one. Wanted to bring things closer together, make it familiar for everybody. So that Statue of Liberty is of course enterable. There's a nice sniper's nest at the top, and that thing is fully destructible too, so you can bring that thing down on top of your enemies. So whilst all this battle is going on, I thought it could take place in a sort of a dusk setting. So those skyscrapers are throwing massive shadows across the map, really sort of changing up the gameplay, and maybe so that we can actually see the IR and V-scope becoming quite useful in this game, rather than Battlefield 3, where it got nerfed to hell and nobody ever used it. Moving swiftly along, we move down to the hot and sunny Mojave Desert, which is a complete and utter dust bowl and an all-out vehicle map. This thing really focuses on conquest gameplay, much the same way that Bandar Desert does in Battlefield 3, with a few shanty towns populated across the map. I think this thing could be the biggest map in Battlefield history. One massive strip of tarmac goes right the way through the middle of this dust bowl, which in itself creates dust clouds to obscure enemy lines, obscure your vision, stop people camping, so that you actually have to move across the map to take objectives, and you can't just camp on one flag. I said this was going to be an all-out vehicle map, and I mean that to the fullest extent of its phrase. So we're chucking jets, attack helis, transport helis, scout helis, MBTs, tank destroyers, dirt bikes, quad bikes, you name it. Well, apart from the water vehicles, everything is in there. Apart from that giant strip of tarmac, we have a few dirt tracks that go across to certain conquest flags, but apart from that, there's not a huge amount of cover, but I do have a suggestion for that. If you look at pictures of the Mojave Desert, it's not a very duney desert. It's rather flat, and it's actually got a few trees on it, so perhaps calling it Mojave Desert wouldn't be the best thing, but it's got a few dunes on it, which of course can obscure the vision of other tanks, and while you're running across the desert, you actually have a little bit of cover. So going from that really hot Mojave Desert, we're going to go right up north to an Alaskan lake. Now this is the one that I've put a lot of time and effort into, and I really like the idea for this one. It centres around a frozen lake. In the centre of that is a small little island. The island itself would be big enough for a 32-man TDM game, and I think that would really focus quite well, having a few buildings on there, lots of trees, so make it really nice and dark, once again bringing that IR and V-scope back into play. Around the outside of that lake we've got a few sort of huts, a few little outbuildings, a couple of boats that are moored up there, but the main focal point of course is that lake, and it's fully destructible because once it's frozen you can break it apart by firing tank shells, helipods, anything you name it. Even grenades can blow off small chunks of ice. That way you can actually ambush any vehicles that have decided to venture onto that lake by firing around it. You can actually set it off floating across the lake, which of course leaves it completely stranded. I'm bringing jets back into play again, but I have a way of making sure that they pay attention to what's on the ground. We're chucking some dynamic clouds in there, so that way they roll across the map from time to time, obscuring the vision of those jet pilots high up in the sky so they can't see what's going on the ground. That way they're forced to go back down and see whether their team need help. I've got Bad Company 2 in my head for this map, I have to admit it. A lot of you guys may have remembered from the beta that we've got Port Valdez, where you actually spawn in through a C-130 and parachute down onto the first set of objectives, well at least the hill above the objectives. Much the same with this. You parachute down onto the top of the mountain and you circle all the way around the lake to finish up down the other end of the map. So that's 3 of the maps. Now we've got one final one, and it seemed to be a fan favourite when I mentioned it about a month ago in that DLC video, and that's the San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge. Now a few of you guys were clever enough to mention that the bridge doesn't actually go across a river, it goes across a bay. So I put my hands up, I made a mistake. But I think we can still adapt this to make it a really good map. That bridge is fully destructible, as I mentioned in the previous video. It's slightly different to how the one works in New York, being as how it doesn't fully destruct, it sort of bends in the middle and then crumples to the ground. That way we can still keep all the water in play, and that leaves place for attack boats and jet skis. And of course if you control the water while that bridge is down, the only way you're going to get across is to swim or take to the air. Just a quick notice point, once again there will be a conquest flag on the middle of that bridge, and I'm going to set up some sort of barricade point like an army checkpoint so that we could have lots of little outbuildings and sandbags to hide behind with the conquest flag in the middle. Of course I'm not going to make it easy for that bridge to come down, that would just be pointless. So we're going to make it a little bit harder for you to do that. So there's going to be 8 different pillars across the bridge. They're going to be manually put in, so it's going to be slightly different to how the Golden Gate Bridge actually looks. And it's going to take 3 shots per tank to take out one of those pillars. So all in all it's going to take quite a few shots before you're going to get that bridge down. The idea being that I do want to focus on gameplay as much as possible rather than just taking the bridge down all the time. It will look rather good, but of course we want to focus on gameplay and not just Levolution all the time. So there are my 4 maps for the All-American DLC for Battlefield 4. Now I want to know what you guys think, because of course this is just my input and I really want to get some momentum going with it. Perhaps we can get DICE to sort of listen to what we're saying here, maybe have a few ideas for the last DLC of Battlefield 4. We don't know what they've got in the works, so perhaps we can put something in their minds now. So make sure you leave all your comments below and I'll try and read as many as I can. But I hope you've enjoyed the video guys. If you did, don't forget to drop a like. But until next time, my name is Westie, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.